Intelligent risk management. What is intelligent risk management? Well, we as humans has a hard time dealing with risks because our perception of risk relies much or even more on feelings than on facts. Therefore, we very frequently misinterpret risks. Kahneman, Slovik and Fischerhoff has very elegantly proved that. We're more afraid of certain risks than we need to be, and we are less afraid of other risks. I can take an example, for example, which is very close to me as I've been a sailor. A lot of people are very afraid of go out sailing because on a sailing boat, the sailing boat is heaving over and you can even get spray on you, you can even get wet. And that is perceived as very dangerous. The same people has no problem going out in a speedboat in 35 to 40 knots, and they are also driven by people who has very little or no knowledge about navigation, and actually that is actually quite a great risk, but is not perceived as such because they feel comfortable in the powerboat. This perception of risk can also affect our business judgment, even if we really don't want to believe that. But all companies and all organizations are constantly exposed to risk, both financial and operational risks. But the companies and organizations that are the best of and most consciously can manage the risk will have a great advantage, a business advantage. In short, organizations that can manage risk better than their competitors will have a market advantage. It's as simple as that. What is then a risk? Well, the Society for Risk Analysis describes a risk as a combination of a probability of an event occurring, the consequences given that that event occurs, and what consequences does that lead to. And in many organizations, this is managed by having a matrix where you assess the impact of risk on a scale from 1 to 5, and you assess the probability for the risk to occur on a scale from A to B, as in this example as we have here. And of course, if you end up in the corner with 5E, for example, that means it is a high probability and it has a high impact on the company. But it's a problem with this because there is a lack of standardization of what is perceived as a major impact, nor is there any real idea about the size of the probability. We have seen in companies where we looked into a large number of these risk matrices, where some people in the same company believe that 5 million Swedish crowns could be considered as a major consequence or a big impact. And some other people thought that 5 billions, well, that could be a moderate effect on the company. So that what is very unclear is what is unusual and what does major impact mean. And we cannot either aggregate multiple risk matrices because aggregation of those doesn't make sense. In general, we as humans have very difficult to estimate probabilities. And in order to describe this, I used to say to people, well, if you don't know anything, you can always say that it is between 0 to 100% probability, and you know that you will always be right. On the other hand, that is a totally useless information. So we need to have something more specific. And in that case, some people say, well, it may be 25% then. But if you say 25%, that actually means that it should really, in the long run, occur every fourth time. So when we do this, we should rather use an interval. If I say the probability is between 20 to 30%, I have added much more information about my knowledge about the probability. And by starting to use this way of assessing probability and also follow up, you start to learn how to handle these probability figures, and they really start to mean something. Actually, in order to aggregate risks, we need an estimated cost and we need a estimated numerical probability. And preferably they should be stated as interval estimates, because that also will give us an indication of how uncertain the estimate is. Risk cost. If we start to manage the risk by defining them as estimated cost and an estimated numerical probability, we can also calculate a risk cost. And that also means that we can start to aggregate risks. And that means that we could mean from the left side of the picture here, when we talk about multiple risk matrices, one matrix for each risk or combination of risks, to that we have, for example, starting by aggregating risk for one project in the right hand corner, and we can actually calculate an estimated risk reserve for that project. But we can also aggregate it up to a business area, where we actually could calculate an estimated risk reserve and even go further and calculate a total risk reserve for the whole company. That means that we have a totally much more better grip of the risk and what sort of risk the company is exposed to. You may be able to take some risky projects, but you cannot take many, and by having a risk assessment for the whole portfolio, it's much easier to handle the risk. A very large Swedish engineering company uses PBRS throughout its quotation management, where quotations are followed from the initial contact to a completed contract. The company estimates that it earns 1 to 5% of the total order sum by consistently and rationally being able to manage the quote risks. And this percentage must be set against the conventional profit market in the project-based engineering industry. In addition to this, PBRS enables a company in question to budget its risk with a much greater precision, and the long-term outcome can be managed more rationally, and people are also on a learning curve. From each project and from each quote, they learn more and more about the risk and how to manage the risks. It's also, as you will store this information about the risk, you will also have a learning possibility from risks that previously has occurred, and you have a learning curve by compiling these risk library, and you can also see what risk did actually occur and which risk did not occur. Well, if you want to know more about intelligence risk handling and what we can offer and help in this area, please contact us as preference.nu. Thank you for your attention.